Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, Showdown. Texas Democrats make their case for voting rights on Capitol Hill as Republicans call for their arrest for fleeing during a special session vote.
House Democrats abandoned both our state and the millions of Texans that they represent.
We are not going to buckle to the big lie in the state of Texas.
New developments from Austin to Washington as President Biden vows to pass voting protections nationwide. Hitting your wallet, Americans paying more for groceries and gas as consumer prices climb for the third straight month. What's behind the inflation and why shoppers are seeing a smaller selection, slower service, and shrunken products. Back in court, a new hearing today for Britney Spears as she fights to end her controversial conservatorship. How changes to her legal team could impact her quest to take back control of her $60 million fortune. And Weed 101, more and more college students interested in pursuing a career in the budding marijuana industry. A look at the cannabis courses and internships popping up at colleges and businesses across the country as this job market grows. That was an interesting one to report on.
Yes, you traveled to Michigan for that one, right?
That's right. Yeah, just right outside of Detroit, the Safety Lab, which we'll get into, kind of trying to destigmatize, the whole industry. And as parents are kind of like, oh my gosh, I have this college graduate who wants to go into this industry. What does that mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool. Yeah.
Very cool. Looking forward to that.
Thanks. We'll get into that later. And we begin now with that political showdown over voting rights that's actually taking place across the country.
President Biden is doubling down on his promise to pass federal voting protections while condemning Republicans who've been pushing restrictive voting laws, calling it, quote, the most significant test of our democracy since the Civil War. As the president spoke, Texas Democrats were in Washington a day after fleeing the Lone Star State to prevent a vote on restrictions there. They've been meeting with lawmakers in the nation's capital, lobbying for federal voting rights legislation, while their Republican counterparts back in Austin are pushing to have the Democrats arrested. We have a team of correspondents covering this on the ground. Priscilla Thompson is in Austin. Mike Memoli is in Washington, D.C. Priscilla, let's start with you. Governor Greg Abbott had threatened to have the Democratic lawmakers arrested. So what is the latest on how the Republican legislators are responding?
Well, Joe, good morning. The Texas House voted yesterday along party lines, 76-4, to give the sergeant at arms permission to send forward those missing lawmakers and even arrest them if that's what it takes to bring them back here to the Capitol. But of course, Texas law enforcement has no jurisdiction outside of state lines, and Democrats have signaled that they have no intention of coming back from Washington, D.C. until this special session is over. So it is very unlikely that we are going to see those arrests and see those Democrats brought back here. And I've been speaking with the Republicans going into day two without a quorum in the House. They are continuing to slam their Democratic colleagues. I want to play part of my conversation with Representative Matt Shaheen.
I think it's a disgrace to the state of Texas. Election law is meant for the states to conduct, and they want to turn over Texas elections to the federal government? No way. Terrible idea. It's a betrayal of Texas.
Democrats are so upset about this legislation. They have left the state. This has not happened in 18 years. Is there any place in these bills where Republicans will say, we're willing to give some concessions to move this along?
I don't think the Democrats are upset. They fly on private jets. They've got beer and alcohol. I think they're on vacation, having a great time on the taxpayers' dime.
Republicans here say that they will continue to hold meetings and work on legislation, though, of course, they cannot vote on any of that without a quorum. Joe?
So, Mike, this Texas-sized drama really teed up President Biden's speech on voting rights yesterday. What was his message about the federal legislation that's currently stalled in Congress?
Well, Joe, you certainly heard the president making a very forceful case, lighting into Republicans, lighting into his predecessor for what he called his selfishness, not his statesmanship, and trying to challenge the election results last fall. He said all these Republican-backed voter changes are a consequence of the big lie, which he said is just that, a big lie. But what advocates and what many in his own party wanted to hear was the president also making a forceful case in support of that legislation before Capitol Hill, the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. The president did that. Take a listen.
We're asking my Republican friends in Congress and states and cities and counties to stand up for God's sake and help prevent this concerted effort to undermine our election and the sacred right to vote. Have you no shame? Whether it's stopping foreign interference in our elections or the spread of disinformation from within, we have to work together.
Now, the president said he wanted to sign those two pieces of legislation, but what he didn't use was the term filibuster. Democrats, progressives did want to hear that, and the president was focused on this speech instead on a much broader audience, talking about this as a battle for the midterm elections as well.
So, Mike, he didn't mention the filibuster. We know that he's been receiving pressure on this point. The odds of passing either of those bills without eliminating the filibuster are slim to none. So what's the reaction on that there? What's the progressive wing of his party saying?
Yeah, interestingly, there was actually a progressive group that organized a demonstration outside of the president's event yesterday. They said they were disappointed. They wanted an LBJ-style real push to use the bully pulpit to promote the filibuster changes that they're calling for. We also heard from Reverend Al Sharpton. Remember, he was at the meeting with the president last week, and he said he talked to the president after the speech behind closed doors to press him on that issue. And he said the president told him that, listen, we're taking this one step at a time. The president thinks this is a very slow process that needs to work its way through as he works behind the scenes on this.
And Priscilla, back to you on the ground there in Texas. Texas Democrats met in D.C. with VP Harris and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer yesterday. Now, beyond trying to just kind of run out the clock on this Texas special session and stay out of the capital of that state, what's next for them?
Right, Savannah, they're going to continue to have those meetings. We expect them to be meeting with Senator Joe Manchin later this week. And Democrats say that, the last time they went there, only about 20 of them went. Now there are more than 50. They hope that this showing will have an impact, but it's very unlikely that they're going to see real action and movement on federal legislation on voting within the next several weeks. And of course, back here in Texas, the governor has signaled that he will continue to call special sessions until his agenda has been addressed. This is still a GOP-controlled legislature. And yesterday, we saw the Senate pass their version of this voting bill. So it is only a matter of time before the House version gets a vote. The Republicans in the House have already signaled that while this may be delayed, it has not been denied. Governor Abbott's agenda will ultimately be addressed and that their bill will get a vote. Savannah?
And Mike, while we have you, we want to talk about President Biden going to the Capitol today to meet with Senate Democrats and discuss one of his other major priorities, an infrastructure package. So tell us about that, the so-called human infrastructure part of his agenda, and also how that's separate bipartisan negotiations over the more traditional hard infrastructure, how that's going.
Yeah, this looks like a real breakthrough that occurred last night within the Democratic caucus. Democratic leaders coming out late last night to announce that there is agreement within the caucus broadly on a $3.5 trillion reconciliation measure. Remember, Senator Bernie Sanders, who's the chair of the Budget Committee, was talking about a package of close to $6 trillion. So there's some compromise within the caucus. And the president now going up to Capitol Hill, something we don't see often, but he's going to a very familiar place, the Senate cloakroom, to talk with Democrats behind closed doors. They want to see real progress before the end of the month. With limited time in session this summer, the president wants to make progress, and that's part of what he's going to try and do in person this afternoon, guys.
All right, lots to cover. Mike and Priscilla, thank you both so very much.
Coronavirus cases in the U.S. are rising once again after months of decline. It's being driven by the fast-spreading Delta variant, lagging vaccinations, and summer gatherings, people getting together. Right now, 48% of the country is fully vaccinated, which has been proven to mean protected against severe illness and hospitalization from the virus.
Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster. He's in Kansas City, Kansas. So, Shaq, we know right next door in Missouri, they've been dealing with a COVID surge in overwhelmed hospitals. What's happening, though, just across the state line there in Kansas?
Well, we spent a lot of time in Missouri on the other side of the border, as you mentioned, just last week. And you heard about what doctors were saying, the surge that they're seeing and the impact that is having. And we're now seeing that impact potentially happen on other states. Here in Kansas, the vaccination rate is actually a little bit lower than what we saw in Missouri. And when you look at it in a county level, you see it goes even lower. We have some graphics up here we can show you showing that only about 35% of the population is fully vaccinated here. That's just a hair lower than what you saw across the border in Missouri. that has doctors here alarmed. We spoke to one was on MSNBC just yesterday. Listen to what he told our Casey Hunt.
We have taken some transfers from those hard-hit areas of Missouri, like Springfield, Missouri as well. But overall, the numbers in our hospitals over the past week to 10 days have been increasing with those acute infections. And I should add, the majority, 75 to 80% of those people that are coming to the hospital are unvaccinated.
And when you look at those fully vaccinated numbers, while in Missouri, about 39.5% of the people are fully vaccinated, here in Kansas, that number is about 32%. Guys?
So, Shaq, we're seeing a lot of vaccine hesitancy. What are doctors saying about that? And what are they saying to patients who don't want the vaccine?
Essentially, get your vaccine as soon as possible. It is your only source of protection, especially with this Delta variant that continues to surge, especially in this area. And you look at cases, they're rising exponentially, especially in a place like Kansas. Listen to what the doctor said about that.
I have patients in my infectious disease clinic who have declined to get the vaccine. They still believe that the infection itself is not bad, or that it is nothing more than a flu-type illness, or that it's a government hoax. There is that continued concern that with vaccination, we are being subject to experiments, and we are like guinea pigs.
Now, despite that hesitation, officials are doing what they can to get those vaccines to as many people as they can. You're starting to see, and you're continuing to see, I should say, those incentives, and still starting to see some new incentives. For example, we'll be traveling to a vaccination site, one of the largest here in this county, where they're now introducing a spin the wheel kind of thing, where you go in, you spin the wheel, and you can get a prize. You can win a prize instantly for getting that vaccination. You get the sense officials are doing whatever they can to get as many vaccinations as they can as soon as possible.
Unclear if those incentives work, but I guess they're going to try whatever they can. Shaq, I know the situation has gotten so bad in some areas. Chicago is now advising that unvaccinated travelers from Missouri and also from Arkansas get a COVID test before coming to the city. Tell us more about what Chicago is saying.
Yeah, this is a travel order that has been in place for several months now, since it dates back to last year. And it was at the peak of the pandemic. Chicago was limiting who can come into the city, or at least saying if you come from these certain states, you need to quarantine or get a negative COVID test. Well, for the past couple of weeks and months, there have been no states on that list. Anyone could travel to Chicago without any quarantine, but that travel order still remained in effect. Well, now with the rising cases in Missouri and the rising cases that you're seeing in this area, you're seeing that travel order come back. Missouri now on the list, requiring that quarantine or that mandatory test before you arrive back in the city.
Curious to see if other places follow suit, restrict travel or put in restrictions for states that are hotspots. All right, Shaq, thanks so much.
Let's stay on COVID with our stellar team and bring in Isa Gutierrez. Isa, good morning. So let's talk about some of the latest coronavirus headlines and what everybody needs to know here. First, starting with the Delta variant and its impact on younger people. And this headline this morning in Tennessee, the state's top vaccination official who was working to get teens vaccinated was fired over that. What happened there? What do we know?
Hey, good morning, Savannah. Yeah, so tensions had really been rising over the last few weeks between Dr. Fiscus and Republican state lawmakers over her efforts to try and get teens in Tennessee, young people in Tennessee, vaccinated. Most recently, she published a memo on the state's mature minor doctrine. That's a Supreme Court case ruling from 1987 that states that 14 to 18-year-old Tennesseans may be treated without parental consent unless the physician believes that the minor isn't sufficiently mature to make their own healthcare decisions. Dr. Fiscus said that many lawmakers interpreted this memo as really an attempt to undermine parental consent for vaccinations. Take a listen.
What really concerns me is that in order to appease the legislators that were upset about this memo, our leadership of the Department of Health has instructed the Department of Health to no longer do outreach around immunizations for children of any kind. There is a significant contingent of people here and many of our lawmakers, unfortunately, who choose to buy into anti-vaccine rhetoric and conspiracy theory instead of listening to actual science and listening to CDC recommendations.
In a statement, Dr. Fiskus also said that she feels that she was fired for essentially doing her job, which was to provide evidence-based education as well as vaccine access so that Tennesseans could protect themselves against COVID-19. A spokesperson for the health department said that they would not be commenting on her termination. Savannah?
And news on that front will not be slowing down as we head closer and closer to back to school time with kids and teens getting vaccinated. Issa, now let's talk about this other thing that everybody's kind of wondering about. It's been a little confusing, booster shots. So federal health officials say we don't need one. We're hearing, though, that Pfizer wants to get one approved. And then we're also seeing that Israel is already moving forward with a third dose as that country experiences a surge, even though they have 80% of adults vaccinated. We heard from Dr. Anthony Fauci about all of this. What's he saying about the possibility of a booster? Could people potentially be getting that third dose?
Yeah, so right now, Dr. Fauci is saying that that booster for individuals who are already vaccinated is not necessary currently. Now, that doesn't mean that it won't be recommended in the future, but right now for vaccinated individuals, boosters are not needed. And he said that that's especially while many Americans have not been vaccinated at all yet, that's really the focus of the efforts right now to get the percentage of Americans who are vaccinated against COVID-19 higher up. He also really is emphasizing the fact that this conversation about whether or not boosters are necessary at the moment is completely separate from the effectiveness of these COVID-19 vaccines. Savannah?
All right. So basically still a lot of questions there. But Issa, thank you so much for catching us up. Good to see you. Now, consumer prices in June rose at their fastest pace in 13 years. Everything from groceries to gas to eating out at a restaurant saw a bump. The biggest driver of inflation last month was used cars and trucks, surging by more than 45%. NBC News senior business correspondent Stephanie Rule explains.
Savannah and Joe, we have all seen it. Prices are up almost across the board, but it's important to remember these price increases are directly tied to the pandemic. And while it's great to see the economy recover with such gusto, we've got some serious issues to work out. In the grocery store, at the gas pump, on the car lot, prices keep rising. From May to June, inflation jumping nearly 1%, and compared to a year ago, up 5.5%, the largest increase in almost 13 years. A big reason, the sticker price for used cars and trucks, jumping more than 45%. Ongoing supply shortages, leaving dealerships without enough used cars to sell.
Pretty up there. The new cars as well. You gotta have a car, you gotta have a car.
We've had the guts to go out and pay the escalated prices to hope that we could sell it to the consumer. We have them in inventory and the consumers are buying them.
Food prices also increasing, like milk up nearly 6%, along with fruits and vegetables up 3%. Meanwhile, restaurants are charging more to cover higher wages. And at the gas pump, drivers are paying 45% more. Experts describe it as a perfect storm. Businesses reopening across the country, supply chain problems creating shortages, and consumer demand soaring.
It's coming off of last year, after which actually prices for a lot of goods really fell. Airline prices fell, hotel prices fell. Now they're coming back with a lot of demand.
The Biden administration telling Americans this is short term, brought on by the pandemic and the economic recovery. What can we do to protect ourselves?
Well, you can shop around. That's one thing you can do. You can make choices to go with substitutes or things that aren't up quite as much.
Now, the White House and many independent economists believe that these price increases will start to slow as we get back to normal and these reopening kinks work themselves out. But in the meantime, it's expensive out there. And even though wages are going up, prices are going up even faster.
More severe weather is expected in the U.S. this week. Scientists are now pointing to climate change as a major factor in weather events like the record-breaking heat waves we've been seeing out west. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin has more.
In the Northeast, freak flooding. In a matter of hours, parts of Pennsylvania doused with up to 11 inches of rain. Residents forced to flee their homes. Meanwhile, out west, historic heat, with the region's largest fire still only 0% contained. After 4 days of explosive growth, smoke from that fire in Oregon now clouding the skies over Utah. Extreme conditions leading to extreme concern, as scientists say climate change shows no signs of slowing its deadly rampage.
Scientists have predicted this for the last 70 years, but it's actually happening more quickly and it's more intense than we realized.
So far this year, there have been $8 billion weather disasters, from the deadly Texas freeze in February to the heat wave that hit the Pacific Northwest, killing more than 200 and devastating the coastline, with hundreds of millions of mussels literally cooked alive. An event so extreme, scientists now say it would have been virtually impossible without human-caused climate change. Severe heat is drying out the West, with reservoirs reaching new lows. The parched conditions now fueling infernos across the region, making the fires bigger and more destructive. 2020 was a record fire season for California, but with more than twice as much scorched earth compared to this same time last year, a record already on track to be broken. Across the West, extreme heat continues to threaten 10 million Americans, and officials are asking Californians to cut down their water use by 15%.
Let's get a check on the latest weather events across the country coming up now this morning.
Yeah, hi, Bill. Good to see you. That sounds like a lot of bad news. What do you got for us?
Yeah, it's been an unbelievable start to the summer just with what's happening in the West. And, so far temperatures, we've been talking so much about the West, but it's actually been slightly below in a few spots in the middle of the country in the Southeast. But it's just in the West where it's just been crazy. And because it's been so hot than normal, look at how many record highs we've broken since the beginning of summer, almost 3,000. Where we've only had 430 record lows. So that's like almost 7 times more. And these were some of the highlights. 213 all-time record highs were broken. Daily highs up to 40 degrees above average. And of course, Canada had that record at 121. And our scientists have gotten together. We call it attribution studies. And they say that this climate change has made these events this summer 150 times more likely than it would have been in the past. So as far as today's weather goes, watch out. Severe storms possible. Des Moines, the Minneapolis, Chicago, Milwaukee, especially that area in the orangish color there, maybe even a few tornadoes, isolated severe storms in the Northeast, but it's not going to pour too bad. And for once, guys, this map is a typical summertime map. This is how it's supposed to look, nothing too extreme. Today's probably the quietest weather day we had since before Elsa.
Oh, my goodness. That's a relief based especially on what we just heard from Aaron.
Yes.
Bill, thank you so much.
Coming up, crisis in Cuba, deadly clashes in Havana between police and anti-government protesters.
Cuban Americans are now worrying about their family back home. More on the unrest up next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. One person is dead and more than 100 have been arrested or have gone missing as police in Cuba continue to violently clash with anti-government protesters. NBC News correspondent Morgan Radford spoke to Cuban Americans who are struggling to contact family members on the island.
A third day of protests in Miami.
It's a change coming, and it's time for a change.
Some demonstrators blocking traffic. Many Cuban Americans worried about family back home.
This is now a life or death situation.
Where Cubans on the island are grappling with dire food shortages, rising COVID cases, and a communist dictatorship that's cutting off the internet while protesters cry out for help.
They are starving. Literally, there are food shortages, there are medical shortages, and the Cuban people need help.
What's it going to take? If it doesn't happen now, when is it going to happen?
Their outrage and desperation captured by a viral hit song called Patria y Vida, meaning homeland and life, a spin on the communist-era slogan Patria o Muerte, meaning homeland or death. Cuban musician Yotuel Romero, who fled Cuba 25 years ago, is one of its creators.
Cambiamos ese Patria o Muerte.
You changed that slogan.
Sí. Cambiamos la muerte por la vida.
You changed death for life.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we need life.
We need life.
Yeah.
Es lo más importante.
Lo más importante
es
en la
the
vida.
most important thing.
He says they are fighting because their family on the island cannot. Activist Dina Stars was arrested by Cuban authorities while expressing her views to a Spanish news channel. Romero was on the show when it happened live.
Pensé en que ella puede ser mi hija.
You thought that could have been my daughter. Nadie sabe dónde está. No one knows where she is.
Nadie sabe dónde está.
So far, the Biden administration is not intervening, but issued a statement in support of the Cuban people. This as Cuba's president blames protests on the U.S. government and its embargo. But Romero says this movement is for Cubans and by Cubans.
No hay nada más lindo que la libertad.
There's nothing more beautiful than freedom.
And this, he says, is just the beginning.
They need the freedom. They deserve it. It's been long enough. It's enough. It's enough already.
Morgan Radford, NBC News, Miami.
Our thanks to Morgan for that piece. Coming up, trouble on TikTok. Vaccine misinformation is going viral on the social media site.
Up next, more on the problem and what's being done about it. Today is International Non-Binary Peoples Day. It's a day to recognize those who do not identify only as a man or woman, which includes those who identify as both genders. New research by the Trevor Project says about 1 in 4 LGBTQ youth identify as non-binary. In the 13 to 24 age group, 26% identified as non-binary, and another 20% say they were unsure or questioning if they're non-binary. And we've got some history-making news from the Emmys. Actress MJ Rodriguez has become the first transgender performer to be nominated in a major acting category. Rodriguez, who these days goes by Michaela J., is nominated for Best Lead Actress in a Drama Series for her role as Blanca Rodriguez in the FX show Pose. Congratulations to her. She was part of our Trans America special last month. I had a great conversation with her. And it's just fantastic. People say that it's long overdue after 3 seasons that she got that nomination.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, your special was so incredible. You've just reminded me all the guests that you had on that. It was so great, but that's such great news. Yeah. So exciting.
Wishing her the best when the awards are handed out.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Joe. Viral vaccine misinformation is infecting social media. This time it's on TikTok. A study by the Institute for Strategic Dialogue found that 124 videos spreading false vaccine info were viewed over 20 million times, liked over 1 million times, and shared hundreds of thousands of times. NBC News senior reporter Brandy Zadrozny joins us now. She covers misinformation, extremism, and the internet. Pretty much a lot of scary stuff that probably your kids could come into contact with. So, Brandy, we always love when you join us with this. This is such an important look at this. Thanks for being here. So first, let's just start with kind of how this happened. I mean, it's a relatively small number of videos, 124, but they have this huge reach. They were able to spread so far. And I know it kind of has to do with specifically how TikTok works. Explain that to us.
Sure. And good morning. So TikTok is sort of what this researcher told me as called a walled garden, which means there's really no way that we can analyze what's on the platform without sort of diving down the rabbit hole ourselves. So there's probably a lot more than just those 124 videos, but that's just the ones we looked at here. What's really interesting about that is that we all know TikTok as this place where people can upload videos. Sometimes that's like a dance routine. Sometimes it's a comedy, and a lot of times it's these confessional style videos, right? I watch the ones about what it's like to be a housewife and mom and teacher because I'm into that. But in a lot of cases, what we're finding is the confessional videos are more anti-vaccination content. So TikTok removes that content, right, when they find it. But what the study found and what we confirmed is that this misinformation, even when it's removed, is living on in just the audio. It's a feature that's called sounds. And those sounds are uploaded separately from the video. And then people take that audio from those anti-vaccination posts and use it as a soundtrack for new videos. They react to it. We have a lot of them, nurses seemingly in scrubs in hospitals, sort of nodding and agreeing with it and spreading it to their own followers. So this feature of TikTok sounds allows misinformation to go viral twice.
First of all, Brandy, that was like the sweetest, most wholesome admission of what your TikTok obsession is. Gotta say, love that. But also, okay, so just to kind of take it a step further with the explanation, when people upload this video onto TikTok, there's the audio. So right now, if this were a TikTok video, you take my audio here. I'm talking to Brandy. Good morning. Then someone can take that, and then that's when we see people either kind of imitating somebody else's voice, you know, tracking under it, moving their mouth the same way, or, like you said, just reacting to it, right? That's kind of what it looks like on TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of times it's literally just a new person saying the exact same words with the audio in the background. A lot of times we're used to seeing that with people, imitating Kim Kardashian saying work isn't the most important priority to me. But in this instance, what it's being used for is to spread anti-vaccine content. And from what we know about misinformation, especially health misinformation, is that it's not spread really top down. You don't have, politicians that are really the most dangerous vectors for this. It's people who you trust. It's people who look like you, people who are part of your community who want to help. And that's really the danger, the specific danger of it spreading on TikTok.
Yeah, absolutely. And so who's being targeted with this? I mean, you mentioned it's people's own followers, nurses, that community. Who's kind of on the receiving end of this?
Everyone, a lot of people, millions of people. But sounds do allow people who are interested in it to find more anti-vax users because they can just go to the sound itself and then find hundreds of like-minded users who would be posting that audio. They can start following them, and then soon you have this algorithm perfectly tailored, because TikTok has an awesome algorithm perfectly tailored to your searching out anti-vax videos.
Yeah, that algorithm is exactly how people end up there for hours and hours and hours and hours. Not speaking from experience or anything. Brandy, tell me what TikTok has done about this. You reached out for comment, how they responded to the fact that this is misinformation spreading on their platform where a lot of teenagers and kids are.
Absolutely. So they either removed or limited the reach of all the videos that we pointed out. And they actually said they were grateful for the heads up, which is a new one for me. But in a statement, they said, "We strive to promote an authentic TikTok experience by limiting the spread of misleading content." And that's including audio and promoting authoritative information about COVID-19 and vaccines across our app. Misinformation is an industry-wide challenge, and we're grateful for reports that help us take action on violations.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that is a great way for a platform to respond, especially the one that is the fastest growing social media platform on the planet. You deserve that type of response a lot more often. Brandy Zadrozny, thank you so much. Wonderful to see you.
It's a word we haven't heard much lately, super spreader. That's because the U.S. daily COVID case counts have waned since the spring as the country approaches the critical milestone of getting half the entire population fully vaccinated. But the virus is not defeated yet. An NBC News article out this morning examines the role of super spreader events in keeping the coronavirus threat alive. Denise Chow, reporter for NBC News Science, wrote that article and joins us now. Denise, good morning. So first of all, I guess we are still seeing these events. Where are they happening?
That's right. We are still seeing these events, and they've actually been going on throughout the pandemic. But as you mentioned, when cases were lower, it sort of removed the opportunity and the chance that we were going to see these large outbreaks, which is why it sort of felt like there was a lull and we weren't hearing about them as much. But they are still happening. We do have some recent examples. There was a church camp in South Texas in late June that was linked to at least 180 new cases. There was a summer camp in central Illinois where it was 85 infections were traced back to this camp. And there have also been international examples. There was a disco party in the Netherlands that led to 160 new cases. And earlier this month, the Miss Mexico pageant had to be halted because nearly half of the contestants tested positive.
So there's some examples there. We know we've also been seeing crowds at concerts and sporting events. I know I was at a baseball game over the weekend. Are events like these the problem, or is it simply that just not enough people attending are vaccinated?
Well, it's mostly the question of not enough people being vaccinated. A lot of the sporting events and big gatherings that are being held require proof of vaccination. But in places where there's lower vaccination rates, there are these pockets of people that are more susceptible. And it doesn't take something like a big sporting event. It could just be a party. It could be another type of larger than usual gathering. And so these are really the instances that are sort of the perfect storm for these super spreader events to occur. And vaccination rates across the board in this country have slowed. And so that sort of just creates these pockets of risk.
And a lot of this is because of the Delta variant, which is worrying a lot of people because it's more transmissible. It's now the dominant strain in the U.S. So with that in mind, how should we change our behavior both as individuals and groups? What are the experts you've spoken with telling you about that?
Yeah, well, actually, the best way to think about it is that there's sort of three main factors that are involved with transmission of this virus. The first is just the characteristics of the virus itself. So as you mentioned with the Delta variant, this is a more transmissible variant. And so the virus has sort of improved its ability to infect people in a way. The second factor is the susceptibility of a population. And this has changed a lot because of the vaccine. So a significant portion of the population is protected. And, we're nearing nearly 50% of the US population being fully vaccinated. The third factor that we should think about is just the behavior of the population. So whether people are interacting and congregating. And that's really the second and third factor are the things that we can improve. So vaccination efforts should be, continue and should be doubled down on. And we should also just be careful and avoid situations that allow these big, large outbreaks to occur.
All right. Great read at NBCnews.com. Denise, thanks so much for your reporting. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, Britney Spears back in court today for the first time since speaking out against her conservatorship.
Yeah, and the big shakeup on her legal team that could impact what happens in her case. That's up next.
Britney Spears is heading back to court today, 3 weeks after her bombshell testimony about her conservatorship.
Yeah, it certainly was a bombshell. The testimony has revealed a divide between the conservators in her case. Her father, Jamie Spears, is calling for an investigation into his daughter's allegations. Reminder, he is the conservator. Meanwhile, 2 members of her conservatorship team have resigned in the wake of the testimony.
Award-winning trial attorney, legal analyst, and author Heather Henson joins us now. Heather, good to have you with us. So first of all, what should we expect from today's hearing, and what impact could all this turmoil surrounding Britney's conservatorship team have on the hearing?
Oh my gosh, Joe. So much going to happen today. We know that a lot of people have withdrawn, as you mentioned. Her attorney has withdrawn. And one of the entities, the financial entity that was helping with her estate, has withdrawn. I anticipate there's going to be a lot of talk about the attorney piece. Who is going to be her attorney? And does she have the right to choose her own attorney? That's going to be the interesting question. And a lot of people, as you mentioned, are fighting about this. The conservator for Britney's self, that's Jody Montgomery, is really in a battle with Jamie Spears, the dad, on that particular issue.
And just a quick follow-up to that, she hasn't had the ability to have to choose her attorney, correct?
That's absolutely right, Savannah. And that's a huge problem. I mean, we have a Sixth Amendment right, a constitutional right. But in these conservatorship cases, it gets a little bit complicated because if there's a situation where someone is not capable of choosing their own attorney, someone has to do it for them. I think here we'll see someone assigned to help with that process. That's called a guardian ad litem or a GAL, someone who comes in and does some fact-finding to see what's going to be the best for Britney.
And Heather, the court also has several filings in support of Britney. I mean, obviously there's this #FreeBritney movement that has huge support from her fans, but then also there's this document of support from the ACLU and even one from Britney's own mom, Lynn Spears. I mean, let's call it less than stellar relationship between her and her dad has been well documented for years since she's been a public figure. He's been the conservator. Her mom comes out and says this. I mean, how does that impact the hearing?
I think it will definitely impact the court. There's enough people supporting Britney's right to choose an attorney that I think it will happen. We also know that a very well-known attorney, Matthew Rosengart, is going to be there today as well. He's represented people like Sean Penn, who also has been known to have some interesting behavior, and Steven Spielberg. People say he's going to be there today, that he may be the person coming in, but this won't all happen today, Savannah. It will be a process to make sure that this attorney who is chosen is the right one for her.
And Heather, while we have you, we should ask you, some members of Congress are now calling for changes to conservatorship laws. Would federal changes have any impact on Britney's case?
Likely not. These are really state-run institutions. And we know in California, there's also been some legislatures offered up, some shot down, some sort of is in the process. But the thing about passing law is it takes time. That's why we often see the courts make the most change. What happens here will set precedent in the future, and then maybe the lawmaking will catch up a little, Joe.
All right. Heather, thank you so much for all your expertise this morning.
You want to come back for an hour later?
No kidding. We're going to do a whole special on it. All right.
Thank you.
It's time now for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
And CNBC's Frank Holland is with us. Hi, Frank. We haven't seen you in a little bit. Good to see you.
Hey, good morning. Happy Wednesday to you guys. We're going to start off with a little bit of Apple news. Apple's reportedly looking to ramp up production of the iPhone this year, anticipating heavy demand as consumers look to upgrade their phones. Sources say Apple is asking suppliers to make as many as 90 million iPhones, about 20% more than what they produced in recent years. The newest version of the iPhone is expected to be unveiled in September. Apple's betting on 5G wireless to help drive sales. Coca-Cola is revamping its Zero Sugar soda. The company announcing a new recipe and packaging for the brand. Coke Zero Sugar still uses all the same ingredients, but the flavor has been quote-unquote optimized for an even more iconic Coke taste. All that's in quotes. The new version will be available in stores next month. Coke Zero Sugar was first launched in 2005 and then reformulated in 2017. And Kohl's is offering teachers a special discount for the first time ever. The retailer telling USA Today from this Friday through Sunday, they can get 20% off in-store purchases when teachers show a valid school ID. The discount is for K through 12 teachers, daycare, early learning, and post-secondary educators, as well as school staff. Of course, there's some exclusions, not valid on things like gift cards, electronics, and toys. Staples is also offering teachers a 20% discount through September 30th when they join its new Classroom Rewards program. And so many teachers spend money out of their own pocket, so great to see them get a discount.
Absolutely. It's so cool, too, when you see those wish lists that you can fulfill for teachers, you know, on different websites and provide them with things they need. Yeah, it's really cool.
I think during the pandemic, a lot of people gained new appreciation for teachers.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, they went so above and beyond.
All right. Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, guys.
Coming up, taking a class with Mary Jane. Yes, that Mary Jane.
Kind of. More colleges and universities are offering courses related to cannabis. We'll show you what's on the syllabus and what jobs look like up next.
Time now for your weekly checkup.
Is that heartbeat new? I haven't heard that under
It's
that.
just fine. You can just hear it. It's really loud right now.
Our favorite segment, of course, NBC News senior medical correspondent Dr. John Torres is with us to discuss the latest health headlines that you may have missed. Dr. Torres, always a pleasure to have you. So let's start with this one. The American Academy of Pediatrics has a new report that's on children that are most at risk of drowning. What can you tell us about this? So important, especially in these summer months.
And Savannah, right now, not only do we have to worry about the pandemic, but it's that time of the year where we especially have to worry about children playing in water and what might happen. What the American Academy of Pediatrics found out is that drowning, 70% of the children and teenagers who drown are males. But on top of that, drowning is the leading cause of unintentional injury related deaths in the U.S. for small children, ages 1 to 4. The third leading cause of that in teenagers, small children and teenagers, aged 5 to 19. And so what are the doctor's orders here? Well, essentially, what you want to make sure is that children have swim lessons or swim sessions so that way they know what to do if they end up in the water. On top of that, especially for infants, provide barriers for those infants so they can't access the water. And as an adult, you need to play lifeguard. If children are in the water, you want to make sure that somebody's watching them 15 minutes increments. Put the cell phone down while you're watching them so that way you can pay attention because these things can happen in an instant.
So fast.
Yeah, so important. Speaking of summer, the summer games are right around the corner. We know you're going there with NBC Sports, but this Olympics is, of course, going to be very different. No crowds now because of the pandemic. So what should we expect to see?
Exactly. And even though there are no crowds because of the pandemic, the athletes are still going to be there. The coaching staff, us media are still going to be there. So this is the first world gathering since the start of the pandemic. And so it has a lot of people excited, but it has a lot of people concerned as well, in particular because of the Delta variant, which is really affecting all of the world right now. And the concern is people will come there, get it, and take it back to their countries. So Tokyo is doing a great job. The IOC is doing a great job of making sure they have things as much as possible locked down. So doctor's orders. Remember, the pandemic's still ongoing when you're watching the game, and it's ongoing around the world. But most importantly, enjoy the games. This is going to be a break for all of us to watch what's going on and just keep a keen eye on what the athletes are doing because it's going to be a bit different. Like you said, there are no fans. And they're not necessarily used to that.
Yeah. Some cool things, though, that they said, like, since you won't hear the fans, you'll be able to hear the athletes better, them talking. You know, there's some silver linings.
Good. That's cool. Optimist. Such an optimist.
Exactly. All right, Dr. Torres, we love space news, and somehow we have figured out how to force it into our weekly checkup. 82-year-old Wally Funk, we love her. We'll get her chance to go to space on the Blue Origin spacecraft. Besides this being such a fun story, we know space is extremely taxing on your body. How do astronauts endure the trials of space? What has the medical field learned from it, and what should Wally know?
And Savannah, we got help bringing this to the news forefront by Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos in their own little space race. Branson already went up. Bezos is supposed to go up this week, at the end of this week or beginning of next week. He's taking Wally Funk with him. She's an 82-year-old woman who was originally what they call the Mercury 13. They're women astronaut trainees that trained in parallel with the Mercury 7, but they never got a chance to go into space. And so what we're finding out is a couple things. Number one, what happens when they go up into space? Well, NASA has exercise programs that they use to combat long-term side effects of cancer treatment, number one, and they've learned that through training their astronauts. And they found out that treatment can be as easy as walking on a treadmill. I went to the Johnson Space Center, and I was able to walk on their treadmill. It's called the Colbert. And it also has this resistance trainer you see right there. And these are just really bizarre ways of doing it here on Earth, but it works really well in space, and it helps them keep that under control. And on top of that, it's helping patients here in the U.S. as well. That's a patient we interviewed who was undergoing breast cancer treatment. And the exercise programs they learned from NASA were helping her recover. Again, could be as easy as walking on a treadmill. Exercise is important. Doctor's orders. Exercise like an astronaut does. Just exercise as many times as you can, every day if you can. And remember, age is just a number. She's 82. She's going to space. Cool. That's going to break a record.
Yeah, no kidding. Good for her. All right.
Exercising.
Well, thank you, Dr. And safe travels to you.
Yeah, enjoy it.
Okay, we'll see you later.
Stay safe.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care.
Cannabis is one of the fastest growing industries in the U.S., and more young people want to get involved. As we continue our special series, Red, White, and Green, across NBC News platforms this week, I took a look at how colleges and universities are taking notice and how students are seeking cannabis-related internships and jobs.
When you were at school, doing whatever you were doing at school, could you imagine this being what you're putting in a tube?
I honestly couldn't have imagined that, but now that I'm here, there's nothing I'd rather do.
23-year-old Rami Wara just graduated from Wayne State University in May with a degree in chemical engineering.
Once I saw the flyer, realized the trajectory of this industry, I realized that, maybe some of the non-conventional job routes for chemical engineering might have been best for me.
Rami works at Steadfast Labs here in Detroit, running quality control tests on marijuana products you'd find in a dispensary.
That's the pink gummy. It's fully caramelized. All of the solvents that were in it have evaporated off, and they're now in the headspace of this vial.
So there's essentially like some type of vapor gas in there.
Yes, exactly.
Anything that was bad would be in there, and that sucked it out, and it's going to tell us from that machine.
Yep. As the nation continues to recreationalize weed, that means that there's going to be more opportunities nationwide for students who want to be in this industry.
Students are realizing marijuana is not a bad place to build a career, as more and more states allow recreational use, including Connecticut, which just legalized recreational marijuana this month.
I figured, at some point, if some states are going recreational, at some point, we're all going to get there.
Monica Palencia Prieto took a course on cannabis horticulture at the University of Connecticut as part of her plant science major. She sees the money to be made and wants to make sure communities marginalized by the war on drugs are getting their fair share.
I've seen how, friends and family members have been harassed or stopped because of carrying a little bit of weed in their pocket. It's been really rough to see just how this has affected our family and how it has affected them, and how it has changed their life in general. I would love to be able to run my own lab, and who knows, maybe I just might want to get into politics. I'm kind of just wanting to get in every single piece of the pie that I can.
A growing number of universities around the country are taking higher education seriously. At Northern Michigan University, students can get a degree in medicinal plant science. Ohio State offers a course on the business of the legalized cannabis industry. At Lake Superior State, students can choose between cannabis chemistry or business. The University of Maryland School of Pharmacy even has a master's program in medical cannabis. Alex Harris is enrolling in the fall.
I'm really excited to get my master's in it and to have access to, some of the highest level of education that the world has to offer regarding the cannabis plant.
She suffers from Lyme disease and uses medicinal marijuana to treat her symptoms.
Cannabis was really a lifesaver for me. In my heart, in my intuition, it's really all that I feel like I'm meant to do.
Back in Michigan, Steadfast Labs is hoping to do its part to reduce stigma and attract serious scientists. The company launching a new scholarship this fall for students pursuing cannabis chemistry at Lake Superior State University.
We're trying to encourage and support students to go into cannabis chemistry, but we're trying to also educate, and that starts with the training of our own people.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now. Stick with us.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.